Hello, welcome to the Mad Batter channel. My name's Chris. As you'll know, since you're watching this video, the masking, or really the selection capabilities of Lightroom Classic, and by extension Lightroom Cloud version, have increased exponentially over the last few updates, but they still fall a long way short of the selection capabilities of Photoshop, which of course is a much bigger program and dedicated to editing and design work. In this video I'm going to show you how to mimic the effects of the Photoshop rectangular marquee selection tool to get a rectangular or similar selection in Lightroom Classic. So just to be sure that we know what we're seeking to do, we'll have a quick look at the Photoshop rectangle selection tool. So here we are in Photoshop with a simple document with just a background layer, and I've marked out a rectangle that we want to select. So what we need to do is to go up here to the rectangular marquee tool, and then you simply drag out a selection. You notice we have a feather of 0. Just drag out the selection like that, and there's our selection. To get a better preview of what you've actually selected, go into the quick mask mode by pressing the letter Q on the keyboard, and that shows you exactly what you've selected. As you can see, the selected area has a sharp edge because we had 0 feather when we made the selection. You can adjust the feather after the fact. So if we press Q again to get out of quick mask mode, we can go into select, modify feather, and choose a figure, let's say 15 pixels, click OK. And now if we go back and press Q again, you can see your selection is feathered. However, a better way, in my view, if we just undo all this, is to stay in quick mask mode and go filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and then you can see the effects of the blur as you increase it. So that's 4 pixels, 7, 20, etc, etc. So we'll cancel out of that. The other thing you can do is to modify the selection shape. So if we go out of quick mask mode, you can go select, transform selection, and then you can shift the selection like that. If you hold the control key, you can skew the selection like that. Press return to accept, and you can see you've changed the shape of your selection. So that's a very short, quick summary of how you make a rectangular selection and can amend it after the fact. Now what we want to do is go back into Lightroom Classic and see if we can mimic some of these selection techniques there. So here we are in Lightroom Classic, and let's say we want to select this advertising hoarding here, which you'll see is rectangular, although it wasn't parallel to the camera lens, so appears slightly skewed. So how do we go about selecting it? Well, there are two basic approaches, and the first one is perhaps conceptually easier to understand. So we'll open the masking function, and we'll start with a linear gradient, and we're going to select down like this, and then remove the feather and move it down so it's on the edge. Now it's not quite aligned up. If I increase that a bit, and just a little tip, if you pull this thing rotates, but if you pull it out you can do adjustments in a much finer manner. So I think that's lined up. see, that's the overlay. We've selected the top of the hoarding. Now all we need to do, click on that, is add another linear gradient, and that'll go here. Again, pull that out for fine adjustments. That's parallel. Let's reduce the feather and move it up to there. Then we'll add another linear gradient and pull that across like that. Pull out that and make sure it's parallel to the edge. Move it up, reduce the feather. Go to the front of the hoarding, and then I'll add one more linear gradient. Pull it in here, pull that out and get it parallel. Reduce the feather and pull it in. Now, as you can see, what we've actually selected is the opposite. We selected everything but the rectangle. So all you need to do is go up to the top mask, not the underlying linear gradients. Click on the three dots and invert mask. And there we are. We don't appear to have quite got this one right, have we? So put it up a bit. So there we are. Now, if you want to make an adjustment, let's get rid of the overlay. Let's say we want to bring up the shadows, maybe the exposure, a bit of contrast, and there we are, before and after. Of course, if you wanted to be really accurate, you would go into here and subtract a brush mask and take the mask off the metal gate in front of the hoarding, but for current purposes we needn't bother to do that. The second way to create this rectangle mask is to use an intersecting mask. So we'll create a new mask, linear gradient, and we'll start by selecting everything up to, from the bottom up to the top of the rectangle. Like that. Pull that out, make it parallel. Scrunch up the feather. So there we are, we've selected everything from the bottom to the top of the rectangle. Now we need to make an intersecting mask. So we'll click on here, and where it says add and subtract, if you hold down the Alt or the Option key, it changes into intersect. Click that and linear gradient. Now, as I say, we've selected everything up to here. What we want to do is now to select down from the top to the bottom of the rectangle, so that all we're left with is the common bit in between. So we'll come down here and draw our rectangle. Make sure it's parallel. And now you see we've only got the common area between the two, which gives us the boundaries of the top and the bottom of the rectangle we need. Now we need to subtract two linear gradients to trim in the mask on the sides of the rectangle. So we go subtract linear gradient, come in from the side here, make sure it's parallel. Looks about right. Then subtract linear gradient again, come in from the side here. Make sure it's parallel, that's about right. No, it's not quite right. Sometimes it can be quite awkward to get parallel, especially using a mouse. And there we are. There's our rectangle mask using an intersecting mask. It's up to you really which you find intuitively easier. Each one uses 4 gradients, so there's no advantage in that sense one way or the other. As I demonstrated with the Photoshop rectangular marquee tool, here in Lightroom you can also amend this rectangular mask after the fact. So for instance, I can drag this that way or that way to make the rectangle smaller or bigger. I can use this rotate tool to change the shape, and of course I can go that way to give it feather. Always drag in the direction of the little rotate tool. If you drag in the other direction, you'll reverse the gradient altogether. Similarly with this one, just grab, and this one, I'll see I can move that. So there we are. You can change the shape, the size and the feather after the fact. So that's how to create a rectangular mask or selection in Lightroom Classic, and you can do it the same way in Lightroom Cloud. Hopefully you found this useful, and if you did, perhaps you could consider giving the video a like. In the meantime, many thanks for watching.